Hello YouTube, this is the Hobbyist and welcome to our new episode. And starting from this week's episode, we'll try to finish the original literary theory we had, in which we compare Stephen King's It to his The Dark Tower series. And in case you have missed the original video where we started all this, which I'll be linking to as an interactive card and as a link down in the description box, in that video, we tried to establish this theory that the characters from the Losers Club in Stephen King's It serve as character prototypes for the quartet members in his The Dark Tower series. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, we drew this conclusion that Richie Tozer is the prototype for Eddie Dean and Cuthbert Allgood, and Bill Denbrough is the prototype for Roland Deschain, and is reminiscent of the young author Stephen King himself. And last but not least, Ben Hanscom is the prototype for Alan Jones in the original quartet mentioned in The Wizard and the Glass. And today in this episode, the focal point will be trying to compare and contrast the two female characters in this ensemble, which is the young Beverly Marsh from the Losers Club in It, and conversely Susannah Dean from the Dark Tower series. The reason why I drew comparison between these two characters goes more deeper than the simple fact that these are the two female characters in their respective groups. The connection goes deeper than that. And let me just quickly summarize my two major arguments right off the bat before we delve into the video. My first major argument is that these two female characters had both utilized their sexuality at one major point in the plots to advance the cause of their particular groups. My second major argument is that these two female characters are relatively better at wielding novel weapons in their respective groups. And with that said, let's delve further into the explanation of these two major arguments. And just a quick warning before we get into the content, into the discussion, this video is going to be spoiler heavy. If you haven't read the works that we're discussing here, please stop the video and come back after you had finished reading the books. And now let's talk about how these two female characters had utilized their sexualities. And let's start with Susannah Dean from the Dark Tower series. And the plot we'll be discussing here happens after the fusion of Odetta and Detta Walker, and I think it transpired in the third book of the Dark Tower series, which is The Wasteland. And at this point, the quartet needs to draw Jake Chambers from his original world to the midworld. This is the point where the quartet went to the speaking ring, which is guarded by this demon who is both female and male at the same time. The demon's weakness and strength is the same, which is its sexuality. Pretty much this means that if you want to defeat this demon, you have to have sexual intercourse with it and get a better hand in this sexual relationship. And mind you, this is not the first time that the quartet had encountered this demon. As you may remember, in the first book of the Dark Tower series, The Gunslinger, Roland also needed to defeat this demon to get Jake Chambers back, who was temporarily possessed by this demon. In this particular encounter, the three members of the quartet at this point, Roland Deschain, Eddie Dean, and Susannah Dean, they all had their particular responsibilities. Roland, his responsibility is to distract the demon, and Eddie Dean is in charge of opening the portal and help Jake Chambers to get into the midworld. And Susannah Dean, because of the fierceness of his alter ego, which is Detta Walker, she's in charge of defeating the demon using her sexuality. And long story short, Susannah Dean was able to successfully defeat this demon in this sexual struggle and buy enough time for Eddie to help Jake Chambers into their world. Mind you, this also foreshadows another future major plot point in the book where Susannah Dean is going to give birth to Mordred. And that's the gist of how Susannah Dean had used her sexuality to advance the cause of the quartet. And now let's get back to the other character, who is Beverly Marsh. The plot point where she used her sexuality to help her group is where the Losers Club had just defeated the Pennywise Clown for the first time when they were all very young, when they were all 11, 12 years old, as they emerged victorious after the big battle with the help of the turtle. As they were trying to get out of the sewer system in the city of Derry, they suddenly found out that they couldn't find their way out. And even the guy who is supposedly best at finding direction in the entire group, namely Eddie, couldn't find the way to the exit. And this is at the time where the water is rising and the whole group is supposedly going to die in this dirty sewer, that the only female member of the group, Beverly Marsh, suddenly came up with this quote-unquote brilliant idea that she needs to have sex with all the male members in the group in order to, and I'm injecting my own imagination here, in order to bring the whole group back together and get them safely out of the sewer system. And looking back at this plot point, I am very glad that I read the book when I'm in my 20s. Otherwise, if I were to read the book when I'm still in my teenager years, this plot is going to mess me up for sure. Long story short, without discussing too much about the scene, after all the boys had run a train on this girl, they were able to get out of the sewer. That's the point where Beverly Marsh used her sexuality to advance the cause of her group. With that said, now let's talk about the second major argument of mine, which is that the two female characters we're discussing here are relatively better at wielding novel weapons in their particular groups. Same as before, let's talk about Susannah Dean first. When it comes to weapons, we have to agree that Roland Deschain is undoubtedly the best at wielding weapons, especially when it comes to guns, because he is the original gunslinger, he is the OG gunslinger, and he is the true line of Eld. However, as Eddie Dean admits himself, Susannah Dean picks up the way of the gun much faster and is able to draw much quicker than he does. And in the book The Wolves of Kala, where the quartet encounters this group of female warriors and this new weapon called Orizer, which is essentially a plate that has very sharp edges, they collectively agreed that among the 5 members of the quartet, at this point, Susannah Dean is supposedly the best suited character to wield this novel weapon. And on the other hand, in the case of Beverly Marsh, before they went against Pennywise the Clown for the first time, Richie Tozer brought this slingshot from his home, and all the members of the Losers Club had a tryout to see which one of them is going to wield this weapon. And surprise, surprise, they came to the consensus that Beverly Marsh is the undefeated marksman in their group. And it's very unfortunate that in the 2017 movie adaptation of It, this scene is, for whatever reason, left out. And almost as if the media is trying to make up for the lost scene, for the deleted scene, I was very glad to see that in the first season of The Stranger Things, when Jonathan and Nancy were trying out the handgun Jonathan stole from his father before they went against the Demogorgon, they found out to their surprise that Nancy was much more better at wielding the handgun than Jonathan. And to me, that scene is almost directly paying a homage to the slingshot scene from Stephen King's It, and that attests to how much inspiration the Stranger Things have taken from the collective work of Stephen King's. As a conclusion of this video, those are the two major arguments of mine for drawing the conclusion that the young Beverly Marsh is the prototype for the character Susannah Dean from Stephen King's The Dark Tower series. If this is the first time that you're on this channel, I would like to have you subscribed, as I try to publish weekly videos where I talk about things that I'm passionate about, such as anime, manga, pop culture, video games, etc. And with that said, in the next episode I'll try to talk about the connections between Jake Chambers and Eddie Kasparov. So stay tuned. I'll see all of you in the next video. Bye bye.